Good morning, friends. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So, that is a motivation path that if you want to win, you have to wake up and start doing. So, let us start. So, yesterday class we discussed about the planning commission, how it failed, how it succeeded, how far it has reached the goal of inclusive development and reduction of poverty to make India self-reliant and to meet various goals. We also saw the National Planning Council, an advisory body attached with the Planning Commission, and how it works at different level of expertise. Somehow these bodies were not working actually, which many states do not feel included. Due to that, there was a need to create a new body of holistic planning, and this body was emerged to be Niti Ayog during the culmination of 12th 5-year plan. We saw a new body that emerged as a body of institute formed by Prime Minister of India Sri Narendra Modi ji. So let us discuss what is Niti Ayog, how it functions. Government of India replaced Planning Commission and established new institution of Niti Ayog. What its works? It acts as a think tank to promote cooperative federalism, and it empowers the states with the equal partnership. Then it was needed that there should be a collaborative facilitation that leads to implementation of various planning and monitoring, because many fallbacks were seen in planning commission. There were corruption, bureaucrats were lagging in bureaucracy, so loopholes were there. Northeastern states do not have adequate share of funds. Therefore, there was a creation of Niti Ayog as a body of corporation. So, it has a governing body comprises of the chief ministers of all state. Prime Minister is heading the body, and it is looked after the matters of development of states as well as the center. So Niti Ayog provides the state level and relevant strategic and technical advice that is needed for the spectrum of key elements of policy and has economic front in the international dimension. Therefore, it works with United Nations Sustainable Development Goal fulfillments, and it publishes its reports and indices based on various parameters of growth and development. It also works as the membership of other corporations. Let us see in detail that how it works actually. So Niti Ayog comprises of core head, who is the chairman, Prime Minister as the chairman of Niti Ayog. Then in periphery comes the vice chairman, who is appointed by the Prime Minister from cabinet minister. He can be any minister or any person. Then there will be full time members. यहाँ पे क्या हो जाएंगे? Full time members or permanent members. Then comes the ex officio members. ये बाहर क्या रहेंगे? Ex officio members. ये क्या करेंगे फ्रेंड्स? ये 4 मेंबर बॉडी रहेगी जो सजेस्ट करेंगी फुल टाइम मेंबर्स को फंक्शनिंग्स के लिए, रिक्वायरमेंट्स और नीड्स के बारे में, पॉलिसीज इम्पेरेटिव्स के लिए और स्टेट्स की रिक्वायरमेंट्स के बारे में. देन कम्स द चीफ एग्जीक्यूटिव ऑफिसर CEO, एंड देयर कम्स द सेक्रेटेरिएट. सेक्रेटेरिएट अभी नहीं है, चीफ CEO है. So it takes meeting of all the chief ministers time after time, and which is headed by the PM himself, and he makes the program and policies for the states to promote cooperative federalism. It is shared value of revenue, shared value of education, health and resources between center and state in a healthy manner that aims at the Niti Ayog working. So now you are understanding what is Niti Ayog actually. अब समझ में आ रहा होगा थोड़ा सा. Niti Ayog is based on 7 pillars of effective government, that is pro people centric government that fulfills aspirations of the society as well as the individual. So it caters societal needs of weaker sections and the vulnerable people in India. It also looks at the anticipation and the response of climate citizen needs, which is called as proactivity. और नीति आयोग क्या कर रही है? It ensures the participation and involvement of citizen by taking the people of grassroots level. It also empowers the women in need. It also have inclusion of all, that is STs, other backward classes, minorities and village people also. That is based on the Antyodaya principle of Deen Dayal Upadhyay ji. Keep it in your mind, and it also aims at equal opportunity for youth in terms of equality. It also promotes the transparency as a principle of good governance, making government visible at the responsible in all levels. So it asks its reports and indices to show the growth and development of government. Okay. So Niti Ayog is working in the country with respect to the other nations in order to make growth and development. It infuses the ideas for growth and development and proper cooperative federalism principle. Therefore, it works as a connecting body between various states, such as some state has inter-river problems, some states have GST issues, so they can be resolved in the meeting of Niti Ayog headed by the PM of India. So therefore it is called as a think tank. याद रखिएगा, Niti Ayog is a think tank body and it works for the infusion of new ideas and specific issue based support. It comprises of Prime Minister, Vice Chairman, Chairman, Chief Executive Officers, 5 full-time members, 4 central government ministers and 2 other part-time members. Now what are the principles of Niti Ayog? There are 7 key dimensions or area of focus of Niti Ayog. Niti Ayog works on the Antyodaya to provide food grains and upliftment of the bottommost. Antyodaya जो कि दीन दयाल जी की philosophy थी. Antyodaya is the last person or marginalized person of the society who is kept below the poverty line, Dalits, Mahadalits, and so on. It also works for the inclusion of the states and the societies by providing fund, functions, and functionaries. It also provides the village development programs by providing the facilities to the Panchayat Raj, facilitating PRI institutions. It also works at the demographic dividend level, improves the population ratio and employment dynamics. It also works for the people's participation at the government level. So it makes the participative government also. It therefore makes the governance easy and feasible and transparent. So it brings the principle of good governance, that is transparency, accountability, and responsibility. Then comes the sustainability. It provides the sustainable development model. Therefore, it participates in the Niti Ayog Sustainable Development Goal. So, what is the rank of India in SDG index? 120th rank at United Nations SDG. Nana? So SDGs we have discussed in the previous class that how 17 parameters were there: health, hunger, eradication of pollution, hmm? and citizen-based development, then climate change, protection of ocean, urban bodies, and so on. So memorize those UN SDGs. Write it in your answer also when you are writing environment problems. Now we have to look at the reports that are published by the Niti Ayog. So Niti Ayog published various reports in order to provide development and track the development model of government bodies. So it tracks the reports by promoting spiritual tourism in the land of Buddha. We saw Bihar and UP and the places where Lord Buddha has been traveling. So it has promoted tourism to those areas in terms of spiritual tourism rather religious. It restores the growth of tourism in the wake of pandemic. We saw COVID-19 pandemic which was lagging behind the country and entire population was suffering. We also saw that how Niti Ayog took action in enhancement of the tourism in the wake of pandemic by providing sustainable measures, opening of various routes, roadways connectivity, Udan scheme, Udan 1, Udan 2, and providing a holistic model of tourism and travel. It then provides the leadership of life. Life aims at the lifelong sustainability at the Niti Ayog, which aims at mindful living, compendium of life practices around the world, and thinking of our planet, 75 ideas to promote life. So life is a visionary document of Niti Ayog in order to make the sustainable life model and to make a more prosperous and livable planet after 75 years of India's independence. So there is a report called Niti Ayog 75. Niti at 75. Read this report or bring a short copy of this report. Every UPSC aspirant must have this copy. So there are the roles of small modular reactors in the energy transition. In nuclear energy, it provides the report of the use of small modular reactors And how this reactor works on the fission based reactors. So there are new reactors also included to provide a clean green energy. Then it puts the report on the best practices of social sector, compendium 23, how social inclusion is being done, hmm, how far policy has reached. So it tracks the policy penetration also at grassroots level. Then it promotes the millets in diet best practices across states and UTs of India in April, and aims UNCDF white paper gearing up to solve the food security challenges. Okay, United Nations Center for Development Fund white paper for solving food security, malnutrition, hunger, and sustainable food availability. It also provides report on production and promotion of organic biofertilizers with a special focus on improving economic viability of Gaushala. So fertilizers are being used to grow crops, wheat, rice, sugarcane and so on, and it also have provision for cows protection, which is a part of Gandhian philosophy in directive principle. BPSC में दी गई है how to protect cows as a domestic animal and animal of growing resource. Now Niti Ayog provides the Sustainable Development India Index, which is a holistic view on the socio-economic and environmental status of India's growth model. So, in the visionary model of PM Modi ji, we saw India growing at a faster rate of sustainable development goal targets, fulfilling the model of environmental protection and sustained development of industries which are pollution free in nature. So he is adding the various parameters of sustainable development goals by United Nations: clean cities, smart cities, ocean and mangrove protection, no poverty, zero hunger, education to all, women empowerment, and vulnerable development. It also aims to minority development and so on. So SDG India Index aggregates the measures which can be understood and used by everyone, such as policymakers, business people, civil societies and the general public. तो इससे क्या होगा, ये सारे measures include होंगे and these are making rational change in the policy penetration and inclusion of various deprived sections of the Indian society. Therefore, Niti Ayog becomes a important body for performing various tasks. Now let us look at imported measures in the economy which takes the condition after the post-independence India is poverty. How poverty is estimated, what are the graphs and curves which determine the poverty. So poverty is caused by the state in which an individual is unable to fulfill even basic necessities of life. It is a condition, it is defined by United Nations as a condition of deprivation of health, deprivation in hygiene and living style. So it also has the minimum basic requirement which is not fulfilled in terms of food, clothing, housing, education and health facilities. Poverty defines the Human Development Reports as denial of opportunities to lead a long, healthy, creative life and to enjoy the decent standard of living, freedom, dignity, self-respect and the respect of others that are the key parameters. And it also provides a poverty trap. So there is a poverty trap and low level of education and healthcare is there. You see people in mm, villages or in slum areas keep on living in a culture of poverty given by Ogburn, a sociologist who gave there is culture of poverty. So people who are living in below poverty line, they used to maintain the same level of line. As they get adequate and adjusted in the same lifestyle and same chances of life, so they don't want to improve their life quality, and that becomes a poverty trap. And it is due to low level of education, low level of human capital, less knowledge, illiteracy, early marriage, and leads to high population, that leads to highest population of India even in a century, that is more than 140 billion people are in India now. So there is low productivity and low income, so that is a trap on development. And trap on growth is low income leads to low saving, leads to low investment. People are having low saving, then they cannot go for further investment in the future projects or purchasing any quality product. They cannot have knowledgeful university access or higher degrees, so they have low economic growth. That model termed to be a growth based model. So there are two models, growth based and development based. Now you should memorize it and make notes out of it. So there are two different kind of poverty, absolute poverty and relative poverty. You should discuss one by one. So absolute poverty is a condition where one cannot obtain certain absolute standard or minimum standard of living such as food, shelter, water, cloth, education, and that leads to reduction in the income of the household. These are due to low income family, and it refers to total number of people living below poverty line. So these all people living below poverty line as a percent of 30% of India's population is facing the absolute poverty. There is another criteria, calorific criteria, which shows that the individual gets food from various sectors and eats every day, measures the term of calorie. So in individual in rural areas have 2400 kilocalories and in urban areas 2100 kilocalories per day, which was estimated by the Planning Commission of India. So we will see how this poverty estimation measures were done by Planning Commission and various bodies of government. So there are different types of poverty. What are these types of poverty? Socio-economic and political aspects. So there is situational poverty, which is due to social aspect. There is generational poverty, which is also due to situational or hereditary aspect. It is coming from the caste rigidity in the entire village system of India. Then comes the absolute poverty, which is again economic aspect, and relative poverty, which when person falls behind the others in terms of competitive measurement, that is relativity. Then comes the rural poverty, which is seen in the villages at the grassroots level, and there comes the urban poverty, which found in urban slums, urban semispheres, that is due to political aspect. So relative poverty, when a person falls behind others in the measurement of inequality of income, it refers to the poverty of people in comparison of the other people. So it is a comparative analysis. Now, measurement of poverty at different parameters. So, overall estimation of poverty is based on data available by National Sample Survey Organization, All India Sample Survey, household consumption at every house level, and expenditures made by that houses which refers under the poverty line. So, poverty is defined with the reference of poverty line with level of monthly per capita consumption. Monthly consumption by per head or per person, which is lacking at a minimum monthly necessary for the living. Then poverty line is an indication of level of purchasing power required to satisfy minimum needs of a person. That it shows the purchasing power parity of individual at minimum level. That is shown by the poverty line. This line divides the population in two groups who are having purchasing power or more than the other and who do not have purchasing power. Such people are considered below poverty line groups. Now let us see the relative and absolute poverty as compared on a graph table from 2005 to 2020. Poverty head count increased in the rural areas 41.8% to 25.7%, and as per periodic labor force survey data, you should remember that PLFS is a government body that takes the revision and the data analysis of various instances, poverty level, structuralization. So PLFS data shows that the poverty head count ratio in the rural areas is 41.8% in 2004-5. In 2011-12 it grows to 25.7, and PLFS data in 2019-50 90-20 it is 30.5. So there are two different data categories. It is NSS CES data, National Sample Survey, and periodic labor force data. NSS data is showing that number of poor in million, rural, urban, and total population 325.8 billion in comparison to 2011, which is 216, and PLFS shows it is 270. Then in urban it is 81.4, in 2012 53.1, and PLFS data 71. Now Tendulkar poverty line estimates that there should be minimum level of earning of a family. In rural areas it is 446 rupees per person per head, and it is rise to 816 in 2012, and as per PLFS data it is 1217.96. So you can use this data in your answer writing. And now UPSC prelims has been also based on statistical data, so you can justify your points when you are writing economics essay on poverty, sustainable development. So you can use this data to justify your points. Now various reports and indices quoting various perspectives of the data analysis. So Tendulkar Committee is quoting in March 2009, submitting its report in December 2009. Committee moved away from just caloric criteria to a broader definitions on the basis of health, education, clothing, food, and uniform recall period. So committee moved its way ahead than the calorific need to the health, education, clothing, and food. It is looking at different parameters of life. So when a person is healthy, he can maintain his good lifestyle and he can have above poverty situation. Also, if someone is having education, he can get mobility, and therefore he can have a sustainable life chances. Then comes a person who can afford clothing and food also. So uniform recall period measured to below poverty line data And according to World Bank 2014 report, national poverty line for 2011-12 after adjusting it to Indian currencies using public-private partnership or a purchasing power parity conversion factor is $1.94 a daily. And in India, with 17.5% of world population, had 20.6% share of the world's poorest in 2011. So keep this data in your mind when you are learning this fact sheet. Now, moving ahead, we look at other perspectives of the poverty estimation through graphical methods, in which we will look around the Gini coefficient, which shows there is a poverty graph in which the people with highest incomes, cumulative share of people, and on the y-axis it is cumulative share of income earned by the person. So when there is a rise in the basis of peoples from 0 to 1, so याद रखिए ये 0 to 1 पे जाती है, again 1 to 0 पे, this is 1, this is 0. So Gini coefficient measures the inequality among values of frequency distribution at the levels of income, and it is calculated by a graph that is drawn in which the area that is taken is considered to be B, and the another area of inequality is called as line of equality, that is 45-degree line or line of equality. So it makes the shaded area called as A and another area which is called as B. So it is ratio of A upon A plus B. This is the formula of Gini coefficient. So 0 value shows perfect equality. That means there is absolute equality when the value is 0 and people are sharing the wealth in a society. People are sharing their resources in the society, and people are sharing their informations in the society. So Gini coefficient is usually defined mathematically based on the Lorentz curve, which plots the proportion of total income of population against total population. So Lorentz curve shows in the field is A, and when it is compared to total population, then it gives the Gini coefficient. Now different reports shows that the Gini statistics is measurement of inequality, and that describes how equal or unequal the income of wealth is distributed among the population of a country. So for example, India has 140 billion population. How equally these are divided or how unequally these are divided. So it was given by Corrado Guinea in year 1912. याद रखिए किसने दिया इसे? Corrado Guinea was a economist and a statistician. So coefficient range from 0% to 1 or 100%, as we see in the graph. It rises from 0 to 1. 0 shows absolute equality and 1 shows inequality. So 1 is presenting the perfect inequality. People living in between 0 and 1 have a sustainable structure of life. Then value over 1 is also pretended to be negative income or wealth. there are committees constituted to measure the poverty at India. Dr. Y.K. Alag Committee 1977, and Alag Committee shows that there was a construction of poverty line for rural and the urban areas on the basis of nutritional requirement. याद रखिए अलग कमेटी की poverty line rural में अलग है, and it is also different in the urban areas on the basis of nutritional requirement. Nutritional की आवश्यकता पे there is different in the poverty structure. Before that there was a V.M. Dandekar Committee and R.N. Rath first systematically assessed the poverty basis of national sample survey data, and it shows that the view of poverty line must be divided from the expenditure that was adequate to provide 2250 calorie. तो 2250 कैलोरी को परचेस करने के लिए जो एक्सपेंडिचर्स मेड होंगे that will be termed under the resource of poverty line estimation, and expenditure based on poverty line estimates that generated a debate over the minimum calorie consumption norms. Then comes the Lakdawala Committee. Lakdawala Committee said the poverty line at 2400 calories. ये क्या दिखा रही है? अर्बन एरियाज में जो पर पर्सन 2400 से कम ले रहे हैं, those are supposed to be poor, and in rural areas who are taking less than 2100 is supposed to be below poverty line. That recommendation by D.T. Lakdawala. Now comes the N.C. Saxena Committee, which said the Ministry of Rural Development to advise the suitable methodology for BPL census and not for the estimation of poverty. See, different committees time after time has been made by the government, UPA government or Congress government. So हम देखते हैं कि India's poverty, despite being these committees, also volatile. So World Bank is showing that it is 21.2%, and at World Bank B shows 12.4. Suresh Tendulkar Committee shows that poorest percentage of India's people 21%, and C. Rangarajan methodology, which we will see later, 29%. The poverty line of Suresh Tendulkar methodology was expenditure of ₹33 per day. तेंदुलकर कमेटी की क्या थी? 33 रुपये पर डे खर्च कर रहा है, उससे कम तो वो पुअर है अगर अर्बन में है, और 27 रुपये से कम में अगर खर्चा कर रहा है देन इज पुअर. Rangarajan shows that it was 47 rupees per day in urban areas and ₹30 per day in rural areas. So in World Bank report, expenditure of $1.25 per day shows that the person is on purchasing power parity, and if it is less than $1.90, then he is a poor person. These are the criteria of poverty estimation. Now let us see that another committees that would report. S.R. Harsham Committee, that comes at the 9th 5-year plan. Harsham Committee reported the stage of identification of process that is living below poverty line. Urban areas, which include automatic exclusion, automatic inclusion, and scoring index of remaining urban families in order. So what we see? Dr. C. Rangarajan Committee report. Rangarajan Sir is putting forward another idea, that is the poverty can be linked to the eligibility and entitlement under the various schemes of the Government of India. In recommendation, he provides methodology used, monitoring Indian economy, then normative and behavioral level tracking. So first of all, the class of people who are poor in nature under CMIE survey, that is Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, and it put forth the different methodology wherein a household is considered poor if it is unable to save. If there is no saving, then it is poor. Then comes the normative and behavioral level, in which poverty line should be based on the normative और adequate nutrition, ideal desirable level of nutrition नहीं है जिनके पास, those are people are period and poor. Then comes the behavioral determination of food expenses when people are consuming the general products from the market in a general behavior. Then comes the nutritional requirement, which shows that average requirement in calorie based on ICMR norms differentiated by age, gender and activity. So different age, gender, activity based लोगों की different earning होती है, and after that they have different calories to consume. Then comes the Arvind Pangadia task force in 2015 shows that Nishad Rama and other such friends, and in the first it continues to the Tendulkar poverty line first, then second it is to Rangajan Committee line, that rural and urban poverty are different in nature. Then thirdly, bottom 30% of population tracking over the time, and fourthly, tracking the bottom 30% on a specific component of the poverty estimation. So in this way, the poverty is being estimated in India at different levels. Now we should look into details of the some of other parameters that are constituting it. One of the serious situation in India is termed to be unemployment. So there are various factors that lead to unemployment, rising conditions of such incidents in India and across the world. So unemployment is rising because of the situation when labor do not obtain employment opportunity despite his willingness to work at an existing wage rate. So similar wage rate is offered, but labor or a person is not able to get employed. And India is developing economy where nature of unemployment is entirely different from that of developing nations. In India, the employment rate is measured as number of people actively looking at job as a percentage of labor force. अब क्या समझ में आ रहा है? The people who are qualified to get job and who are employable in India still not finding the job are unemployed in India. That is different at the global unemployment level in comparison to Africa or other Southeast Asian nations. So as per Ministry of Labor and Employment, the unemployment rate of the year 2014 is 4.90. So we should focus on recent data of 2023. Now different types of unemployment. So unemployment in the world is considered as different levels, but in India it is considered under two levels of categorization. First is rural unemployment, second urban unemployment. So rural unemployment shows seasonal unemployment and disguised unemployment. Why? Because India has only three seasons of cropping: Rabi season, Kharif season and the middle one season, in middle of the rainfall. So therefore the laborers who are ready to work in the fields in Rabi season or Kharif season, there is gap between these seasons As we see, after ripping off wheat, the gap keeps going and that leads to decline of the labor employment. Similarly, disguised employment is there. So more than, if there is a requirement of 10 people, so 20 people are working in the same field. That shows disguised employment. Then comes the urban unemployment. Urban unemployment shows educated unemployment population who are highly educated, such as PhD holders or master degree holders who are not working. Then there is industrial unemployment. It is structural unemployment. So it is of four types: structural in nature, then it is cyclical in nature, it moves in a cyclical order. Then there is a frictional unemployment, that is going through the friction between two bodies. And there is technological unemployment, which is generated with the upgradation of new technologies such as AI, biometrics, quantum technology, and so on. Then comes the impact of these factors, which we see in this graph. There is beverage curve. So what is the beverage curve? That is showing the shift in the information from employability at the beginning of December 2007 and the recession period. What we saw, 2007 subprime crisis, which shows that the reduction of population was most volatile toward the year 2014, when there was a subprime crisis, there was collateral debt obligation in the US based agencies, and people in the United States of America were deprived of job, and somehow they lose their job by mortgaging too many of the rental properties. They get into debt trap and they lose this job. So this condition of unemployment was visualized in USA at various levels from January 2001 toward the November 2007. So this is a condition in which the unemployment rate is constant despite the presence of existing structure, that leads to the beverage curve. Now the next part, different types of unemployment in India, goes for structural unemployment. In this type of unemployment, demand of labor falls short to the supply of labor due to rapidly growing population and immobility. What we see in India, rise of population and limited companies, so people fail to get employed. Then there is disguised unemployed, refers to a state of unemployment in which more people are engaged in work than really needed, which I explained earlier. Then there is requirement of 20 people but 50 people are working there, that leads to disguised unemployment. Now let us look at the another feature of unemployment shows in this curve, that is deriving angel curve from income consumption curve in case of necessities. So it shows that there is quality and quantity that is consumed by purchasing a commodity that was rupees 300, and commodities which were brought in first quarter were IC1 and in second quarter IC2, but in the rise in price or inflation leads to IC3. This kind of proportionate rise in the consumption curve shows that the deriving angels curve. It is called as deriving angel curve. It is very important when you write answers on the unemployment, and estimate the poverty, then it's very important. Similarly, when there is income is rising, so purchasing power is also rising. So in quarter first it is at R dash level, M1 R1, then in quarter 2 it is S dash M2 Q2, but in quarter 3 it is T dash. So that shows it is constant rising. As the income is increasing, expenditure is also increasing. Okay, so that makes the income consumption model at a larger level. It displays how household expenditure on the particular good or services varies with change in household income, and as the income of household increases, the expenditure of food as a percentage declines, and the expenditure on the goods increases. So food commodities में expenditure कम हो रहा है, but commodities of uh, exclusive needs or uh, like mm, gregarious goods and the goods which are in uh, like jewelries, gems, so these goods are consumed at more level. Now let us see another detail of seasonal employment. So when there is off season of the farming area production that lead to certain season of the year, and there the period of such unemployment varies from state to state depending upon the method of farming, condition of soil, the type and number of crops grown. So it is a rural challenge when there is gap between two cropping seasons. Then comes the open unemployment. In a situation when there is person is able or willing to work at prevailing wage rate but fails to get work, it is called open unemployment, because such unemployment can be seen and corrected in terms of number of unemployed people, willing people. So in this way I believe that you have understand this perspective very carefully. So we will also see that some of the answer writing methods also. Now next is the Kujinates curve. Kujinates curve provide the income inequality, and in terms of developing countries, so it shows that relationship between economic growth and inequality. So as the growth rise, inequality also rises in developing economies. But as the country become developed, so the growth is increasing and inequality started decreasing in the developed economies. When it reached certain level of development, then inequality is declining at massive rate. So it is inverted U shape, means that initial economic growth leads to greater inequality, followed later by reduction in inequality. Now you see there is total tax revenue collected in the Lafar curve. So Lafar curve shows that lower tax rate boosts economic growth. So as government reduces the tax, government tax is reduced, it leads to a rise in economic growth, and it increases the overall burden of taxes from T1, you see tier 1, to tax 2, which is T2, which do not lead in rise of total tax revenues. In year 1979, so economist Arthur Lafar has given this kind of methodology. So there is a situation in which it is an arithmetic progression in which dollar is a tax cut translates to the direct to the one less dollar in the government revenue. And even in India we see that there is reduction in government tax and rise of startups and more industrialization. So the other effect in longer term, which Lafargue describes as the economic growth, and it works as the opposite direction of a different economic level. Now next curve shown is the Phillips curve, which proves that the economic model is divided by the wage inflation rate. Wage is based on the salary bound people, and there is unemployment rate. So short run guided by the Phillips curve, at a period of time when there is unemployment rate is rising, then the salary is also reduced, and that shows the inflationary cycle, or in the situation of war or crisis scenario as we see in the COVID pandemic. So A.W. Phillips states that the inflation and unemployment have stable and inverse relationship. So as the inflation rises, unemployment rises, and the theory claims that economic growth confirms inflation, which in turn should lead to more job and less unemployment. So as inflation reduces, employment rises according to Phillips curve. Now next curve is the Rangajan curve, and Rangajan curve shows that there is economic performance which is declining as the size of government is rising, which we saw in the case of Pakistan economic failure, that the display of relationship between government spending, when government is spending more on the horizontal than GDP growth rate, on vertical of economy is declining, and it is an inverted U shape again, and displaying that the level of government spending at which economic growth theoretically maximizing economic growth. Okay, now another curve comes as the Kujinates curve, which is very important. It is also asked in prelims, UPSC prelims and other state examinations. So now we see that there is consistent rise in the stage of economic development which threatens or destroys environmental factors such as biodiversities, mangroves, forests, hmm? and there is pre-industrial economies, which we saw before industrial revolution, that there was rise in the environmental degradation and pollution as industrial revolution begins. More industry setup, more exploitation of resources, damage to environment. That comes a turning point when it goes to the post-industrial phase of economies. After 50 years, which we see that decline in the stage of economic destruction, and therefore there will be rise in the growth of income per capita. So it shows the relationship between economic progress and environmental damage. Through the time as economic progress, a country develop initially, then it leads to heavy pollution through thermal power plants, refineries, and any of the core sectors, which are 8 core sectors I have told you earlier. So any of these sectors lead to heavy pollution, degradation of wildlife, degradation of forest resources, and degradation of biodiversity. But after at certain level of time, there is a growth of income in per capita, which is seen in the U-shaped curve. Now you should realize that these curves remain very important for your mains examination as you justify your points writing. So drawing these curves, let us see some of the questions being asked by UPSC previous year. Estimate the poverty situation in India after independence. Why Planning Commission seemed to fail meeting necessary targets of growth and development. Explain different curves and graphs of showing mathematical analysis of inequalities. Or it can be asked that elaborate the poverty line method by various economists. So you can give calorific method and you can give the income based methods. Tendulkar Committee and this Lakdawala Committee and this, other committees. You said you should mention all these committees and popularizing the reports giving the statistical fact. Then you can get the exact answer. So let us discuss answer of one of the question. Suppose let us see Planning Commission. So here it is asked why Planning Commission failed to meet these targets. So introduce it beautifully that after India got her independence, Planning Commission emerged as a pioneer body meeting federal targets of growth and development. Then in body you have to elaborate on the planning methodology, second 5-year plan, rapid industrialization, third 5-year plan, and fourth plan in which war situation were driven. You add sub dimensions that how the challenges of emergency 1975 and poverty and unrest in India, unemployment and creation of balance of payment crisis leads to challenges against the Planning Commission, which somehow remain hampered in meeting these targets at federalism. Then add subtitles and add subheadings also, that how many state government feel deprived of resources, northeastern states, tribal sections, Jammu and Kashmir. Then these led to formation of background of Niti Ayog. Creation of Niti Ayog led to 7 parameters and therefore conclude with the vision of Niti Ayog Preceptor Niti 75 report. Okay, in this way you can plan a beautiful answer. We will discuss other perspective of answer writing in our upcoming classes, so be tuned, stay motivated, try to be your t.me/gsrevolt. So ending this class over here. I believe you are working hard and you are working for your goal. Thank you and have a nice day. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.